Flesh and Blood has 2 years left. Hey, let's be honest here. The odds were always against this game succeeding. It wasn't created by a corporate entity, and it wasn't based on an existing property. It wasn't cashing in on a trend. It was just created by a guy, James White, a lifelong gamer and player who dreamed of bringing back the feel and joy that he experienced in the 90s and early 2000s, a joy that he felt had faded from many of the giants in the card game scene. And so he created his own game, Flesh and Blood, and wanted to bring it to game stores around the world. It won't last 2 years. He was laughed at to his face. Distributors hung up the phone on him, oftentimes after a few words of mockery. He literally had to sell off everything he owned just to keep his fledgling company afloat. 2 years, tops. That's how long these games last, right? He even sold off his Magic the Gathering collection, the Power 9 he had cracked from packs as a kid, the cards and memories from the very days he hoped to bring back with Flesh and Blood. I remember when I picked up my first couple of Blitz decks and sat down to shuffle up and play with them. The cashier at my local game store couldn't stop talking about Flesh and Blood, talked my ear off. My videos themselves were filled with comments of people telling me it was the most fun that they had had playing in a long time. So yeah, I was going to give it a try, but apparently there were already weekly events being held, a new set coming out, but wait a minute, I thought no one actually played this game. It's a speculator's pump and dump, some guy on the internet said. I think it was on Reddit. And then I went to Vegas and saw just how nobody plays this game. This game whose company is committed to welcoming, accessible in-person play that is done in Flesh and Blood at your local game stores and with cards that come from affordable packs. So yes, Flesh and Blood does have only 2 years left until it will have been around for half a decade, because today is their 3-year anniversary. So that means they have just 2 years left until they will have been around for half a decade. Yeah, I love Flesh and Blood, and I'm not the only one. The little game that could has picked up what the giants have left on the table: joy, competitive events, community, and as it prepares to celebrate that 3-year anniversary with its largest gaming event ever in San Jose, Worlds, which absolutely I will indeed be attending and jamming all sorts of games at, it is safe to say Flesh and Blood isn't some new game that no one has heard of anymore. It is the game that is here to stay. I'm here today to tell you why I believe in Flesh and Blood. So yes, in celebration of their 3-year anniversary, Flesh and Blood is holding the biggest event of the year, their World Championships. I'll be in attendance, and if you love Flesh and Blood, or even if you've always wanted to give it a try, I hope to see you there. This is going to be such a fun event. The best players in the world will be on hand to compete for the highest honor in the game, becoming the first world champion. But there's something here for all players, experienced and casual, new and old, as Worlds will be hosting tournaments for all Flesh and Blood players, including, but certainly not limited to, a classic constructed calling, a blitz battle hardened, and 3 full days of side events, cash prizes, gold cold foil promos, and so much more on offer throughout this 3-day event that is open to everyone. All of that is happening in San Jose, November 4th through the 6th, and I cannot wait to be there. But in addition to the now debunked nonsense of Flesh and Blood being a game that no one plays, another weird holdover is this idea that Flesh and Blood costs a fortune to play. Bunk! One of the many advantages to Flesh and Blood being made by an actual, no sarcasm, small indie company, Legend Story Studios, is that they have a much better ability to deftly respond to issues and concerns of the community. And for a game that is based so heavily on player access, on the game's success being measured more by players, playing it and enjoying it, the barrier to entry, I feel, was very well addressed. And you know me, I am all about affordability and access, and yes, reprints, which they've done in the white border, but that's another video. I even was harsh on one of Flesh and Blood's recent products because of this. But overall, Flesh and Blood is not some game where boosters are overpriced and boxes impossible to find. Bunk! Quite the opposite. In the early days of the game, yes, demand skyrocketed, and the combination of this being a new game with a small print run, as well as, a global pandemic, meant some of the earliest sets had crunches where product was selling for far, far higher than it had to. It quickly gained this reputation as the collector's game, the game with the overpriced boosters and outrageously priced singles, and yes, there was a window where that was true, but it was a brief one. And today, you can get booster boxes of the current set at very affordable prices. And while there's certainly high-end singles, the cost of putting a deck together is no worse than a lot of other games. In fact, as someone familiar with a lot of other games, I'd say Flesh and Blood is a lot more reasonably priced overall. A big factor of that is the way armor and equipment works in Flesh and Blood. While there's exceptions, the majority of cards in your deck aren't the high-price items. The real expense is on armor and equipment, but that expense is greatly negated due to the fact that most armor and equipment is used in multiple decks. So while yes, something like a Spring Tunic is indeed a pricey pickup, you only really need one copy, and you can use that one copy in 2, 3, 5 of your decks. Also, while yes, there's super expensive versions, there's also significantly cheaper ones as well. Maybe not so much with Spring Tunic, but with the majority of equipment that's out there. And I love keeping my equipment in top loaders and armoring up my different heroes in my favorite equipment, sharing the same cards across several decks. Flesh and Blood is such a fun game. And the now global events that start at your local games store and carry you all the way to major tournaments, really displays the commitment this game has. One of my favorite quotes from the game's creator and CEO, James White, is him saying that it's vital that they not release too much product because players need time to play with the cards, to dive in to the sets, to experience all the work that their team has done crafting and creating these play experiences. It's interesting, they're measuring success by different criteria than a lot of companies.
We put a lot of effort into our booster draft sets. We really do, and I think that Flesh and Blood is a great draftable game. It's really important to me. I've been a gamer. I'm a gamer just like you guys. You need to have time to enjoy the product. You need to have time to explore the nuances of the product. So 4 per year is the limit for me, in my view, to be able to give the fans the time to digest it and enjoy the product.
James is surprisingly often on hand at these events, far from aloof. He has his ear to the community and is a great demonstration of listening to how people want to experience his game versus telling them how they need to experience it. It's amazing that he's gone from a guy distributors hung up on to someone really revitalizing the gaming scene. So yes, Flesh and Blood has 2 years left. Until it will have been around for half a decade. Hey, it's a framing device. It's for YouTube. Don't hate the player, hate the game, my lovelies. I believe in Flesh and Blood because everything I see them bringing to the table is for the love of the game more than the min-maxing of its customer base's wallet or just cracking out SKUs. I'll be in San Jose for Worlds, but even if you can't make it to that awesome event, check out the game at your local games store. Pick up the incredibly affordable Blitz decks to jam with a friend, maybe a few boosters to upgrade and augment, or just watch my How to Play video. For a game with its heart and soul so heavily rooted and born from the past, it's the future of Flesh and Blood that I most look forward to.
We have over 1,100 unique players registered for the Pro Tour and the calling. This is the mission. The mission was to bring people together in the Flesh and Blood through the common language of playing great games, and this is it. Yeah. This is it at its pinnacle. And I feel so grateful that people have come here from all across the world to make that happen. And I will be eternally grateful, and this will go down in history as one of the highlights of my life, and I thank you very much.
Awesome. Me too. Thank you, James. Yeah.
Hey, want to get a game? Well, this video will teach you how to play Flesh and Blood in less than 15 minutes. Flesh and Blood is a trading card game where two heroes fight to the death. Each game begins with a hero who can hold weapons and equipment. The main gameplay is a back and forth, where a hero attacks while the other player defends with their deck. Flesh and Blood comes from Legend Story Studios, and this is a company that is committed to their games being played in person and at the local game stores. In fact, that's what the very name of Flesh and Blood comes from. They want this game to be played in person, to be played in flesh and blood. So let's take a look. Every game of Flesh and Blood begins with your hero card.